And today, we are doing a deep dive into one very specific calendar year, 2026.
And, this wasn't a random choice. The material we received from you paints 2026 as an undeniable inflection point.
An inflection point. What does that mean in this context?
It's a year where these major sort of generational long-term global plans, for better or, maybe for worse, are all scheduled to come to a head.
Okay, so it's a culmination.
Exactly, a culmination. And it's creating this really powerful intersection with accelerating technology on one side and rising geopolitical tension on the other. It's a perfect storm in a way.
Let's unpack that. The inputs we're working up today are, I have to say, unusually broad. They range from these very concrete, confirmed schedules for, like, deep space missions.
Right. And regulatory breakthroughs in medicine. Very solid stuff.
All the way to these detailed and, frankly, highly sensitive warnings about the stability of the entire international system.
It's a huge spectrum.
So our mission today is really twofold. First, we have to extract the definitive nuggets of knowledge about the external forces that are shaping 2026. These are the enormous fixed variables you just have to understand.
And second, and this is maybe the most critical part for you, the listener, is we need to synthesize the internal systems that were provided in the material.
Right, these frameworks for actually dealing with it all.
Exactly. We have two incredibly powerful and, interconnected frameworks. There's the three-stage identity shift model.
The metamorphosis.
Yes. And then there's the much more practical CEO execution method. These systems are really the actionable knowledge for maintaining agency, for mastery, and frankly for success in a year that's going to be defined by external chaos.
It's a real study in extremes then. You've got confirmed transformation on one side and this unpredictable volatility on the other.
A perfect way to put it.
So we'll start with the hard, optimistic facts, the global calendar. Then we'll pivot into those geopolitical shadows where the instability really lives. And finally, we'll dedicate a big chunk of time to those powerful frameworks for mastering your own personal destiny.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, let's start with what is already fixed on the calendar in Section 1.
Okay, so we begin with the shifts that are already, set in stone. These are the changes that will dictate infrastructure, media coverage, the whole global cultural mood for the entire year.
And there's really no greater fixed point in the sources than the World Cup, which is just set to dominate the summer.
It's going to be absolutely massive. And when the sources talk about the FIFA World Cup 2026, the language really shifts. It's not just a major event.
No.
It's a global transformation. This is not just another tournament. It's being described as a complete structural overhaul of the world's most watched sporting event.
A structural overhaul. Let's break that down. What's the biggest change?
Well, first, the logistics. We're seeing this colossal shift. For decades, it's been one host country, maybe two at a push.
Right.
This is the first time the tournament will be jointly hosted by three countries: Canada, Mexico, and the United States.
3 countries. And across 16 host cities. The coordination for that alone just sounds monumental.
It is. I mean, think about it. 16 cities spread across an entire continent. The security, the infrastructure, the travel. It's a staggering undertaking.
But the real game changer here, the thing that affects the entire competition, is the expansion.
Absolutely. For nearly 30 years, since 1998, we've all been accustomed to that 32-team format.
It's what we know.
It's what we know. Now we're jumping to 48 national teams. That's a 50% increase. It's transformative.
And that expansion, as you said, it dictates everything else.
Everything. The teams are going to be distributed into 12 groups of 4, and this immediately translates to the duration and the sheer volume of games.
So how long are we talking?
We're talking 39 days of competition. It's scheduled between June 11th and July 19th. And that brings the grand total of matches to 104.
104. Wow. That just solidifies it. This will be by far the longest World Cup in history.
The longest and the biggest.
And that scale, it isn't just a logistics challenge for the organizers, right? It fundamentally alters the entire summer for everyone else. The media landscape, the economic landscape.
That's the crucial implication the sources really force us to consider. It becomes this economic and infrastructural, a black hole that just sucks in immense investment and coordination.
You mean for the host cities?
For the host cities, yes, but also globally.
Yeah.
Think about urban planning, security, accommodation. And you're doing it across 3 different legal and economic systems. For those 16 cities, 2026 becomes a pivotal year for defining their urban futures.
And for the media?
Total saturation. 104 matches will just consume the entire global sporting conversation for over 5 weeks. Everything else, every other sport, just gets pushed to the margins. It will be all World Cup all the time.
And we can't forget the historical significance here, especially for Mexico.
No, it's a major, almost impossible record. This will be the third time Mexico has hosted or co-hosted a World Cup.
After 1970 and 1986.
Exactly. It's a huge point of national pride. And the final, the capstone to this whole continental effort, is slated for MetLife Stadium.
So a massive summer. But before all that chaos kicks off, the year actually starts with the Winter Olympics.
That's right. Milan Cortina 2026, held in Italy from February 4th to the 22nd. And the sources note its unique characteristic as being the most geographically dispersed Winter Games ever organized.
Dispersed how?
It's spread across multiple venues throughout the Italian Alps. It's not just one city and its nearby mountains. It's a whole regional effort.
What stands out to me from the notes here is the introduction of a completely new sport that always suggests a sort of evolution in the Olympics itself.
It does. And that would be ski mountaineering. It's making its official Olympic debut.
Ski mountaineering.
Yeah, it reflects this increasing global interest in these very extreme endurance-based winter sports. It's not just about speed down a hill. It's about endurance up and down it.
And critically, something hockey fans are going to be very excited about.
Oh, absolutely. 2026 is widely anticipated to mark the return of NHL players to Olympic ice.
Which completely changes the hockey tournament.
It raises the profile, the competitive intensity. I mean, it makes it a true best-on-best tournament again. It will be a huge story.
So we start the year with this intense, dispersed Winter Games. Then we move into this 5-week summer monolith with the World Cup. And of course, you've got the background noise of the Formula One season, the tennis Grand Slams, the big cycling tours.
The Giro, the Tour, the Vuelta.
Yeah,
the whole calendar is just packed. It's a year that absolutely demands global attention.
But the fixed calendar also features a shift that goes far beyond Earth's orbit.
It certainly does. Moving from terrestrial sports to deep space, 2026 is scheduled to feature humanity getting closer to the moon than it has in over half a century.
We are talking about Artemis II. This is NASA's scheduled crewed lunar flyby in February of 2026. And the weight of this is immense.
It is. This is the first time in 50 years since Apollo 17 that human beings will actually travel beyond low Earth orbit. The context of that distance, that time, is just staggering.
So what's the mission profile? It's not a landing, right?
Not a landing, no. It's designed as a full systems stress test. It's a 10-day journey, planned to orbit, and then fly by the moon. And it's going to reach a historic distance of over 9,200 kilometers beyond the moon.
Whoa! So they're going further out than Apollo ever did.
That's the plan. And that record distance is essential. It's for proving the resilience of the crew, but also the entire technological stack in real deep space conditions.
And we know the crew. There's Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen from the Canadian Space Agency. So what is the fundamental technological purpose they're testing with that massive SLS rocket and the Orion capsule?
The core mandate is to validate every single critical system under actual deep space stress. They have to prove the viability of orbital maneuvers, the approach procedures, the life support, the environmental controls.
All the things that have to work perfectly.
And critically, the crew's ability to take manual control of the capsule in an emergency. They'll be practicing flying it by hand.
So if Artemis II succeeds, it's not just paving the way for a future lunar landing.
No, it validates the entire architecture, the whole foundation upon which U.S. deep space exploration depends for, the next 20 years. It's a go-no-go moment for the program.
But the sources are quick to highlight that this isn't just a U.S. mission year. There's this accelerating international race for lunar resources, and it's primarily led by China.
Correct. China's Tianji 7 mission is a major parallel event scheduled for 2026. And its objective speaks directly to the future of space exploration, finding water ice at the moon's south pole.
And the technology that the sources detail for this probe, it sounds highly sophisticated. It's much more than just a simple lander.
Oh, it's a whole integrated system. You have an orbiter, a lander, a rover, and a specialized hopping probe.
A hopping probe?
Yeah, it's this smaller component, and it's engineered to actually fly directly into the permanently shadowed craters, these regions that haven't seen sunlight for billions of years, specifically to search for water molecules.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture for you listening, why does finding water ice on the moon matter so fundamentally? Why is it such a race?
Because it fundamentally shifts the economics of all space travel. Water is, I mean, it's resource gold in space.
You can drink it, obviously.
You can drink it, you can use it for radiation shielding, but most importantly, you can crack it into hydrogen for rocket fuel and oxygen for life support.
So you don't have to launch it all from Earth.
Exactly. If you can access and harvest water ice in situ on the moon, future missions, especially the big ones aiming for Mars, no longer need to haul all their propellant and life support up out of Earth's gravity well. That radical reduction in launch mass makes deep space travel exponentially cheaper and more viable.
So the race for water ice is really the race for establishing a permanent, economically self-sustaining human presence off-world.
That's it. It's the key to everything that comes next.
That puts a completely different context on those February space headlines. All right, let's shift back down to Earth and look at some of the scientific and cultural milestones scheduled to transform 2026.
Okay, on the medical front, 2026 could bring one of the biggest leaps forward in cancer diagnosis in decades. We're expecting results from a massive UK clinical trial.
And this is for a new kind of blood test for cancer.
Yes, a revolutionary blood test. The trial itself is enormous. We're talking over 140,000 volunteers.
Wow.
And the test, it's often called a liquid biopsy. It's designed to detect nearly 50 different types of cancer. And, critically, it aims to do this before symptoms even appear.
So how does it work?
The underlying mechanism analyzes these tiny fragments of DNA that cancer cells shed into the bloodstream. It's looking for those faint early signals.
The implication for public health, I mean, if this is successful, it's immediate and staggering.
Precisely. The sources noted that if the results are positive, the NHS in the UK plans to rapidly incorporate this tool. They want to integrate it into early detection and screening programs across the country.
So it moves cancer screening from being reactive, waiting for symptoms.
That's being proactive. Preventative medicine at a massive scale. It's a paradigm shift.
And this speed of implementation, it ties directly into this theme of regulatory acceleration that the sources predict will define 2026.
Yes, we're seeing these dual acceleration efforts. In the UK, you have major updates to clinical trial regulations, the biggest in 20 years, all aimed at streamlining and speeding up research.
And in the U.S.?
Simultaneously, the U.S. FDA is actively considering changing its drug approval processes. They're looking at potentially allowing authorization based on the results of a single, well-designed clinical trial instead of the traditional two that are required.
So the message from regulators is clear.
The message is, the global regulatory infrastructure is trying desperately to catch up to the speed of scientific breakthrough.
Okay, let's pivot now to culture. For anyone in a creative industry, 2026 looks like, I don't know, Christmas morning. There's this massive flood of foundational works that are entering the public domain.
This is a huge, fixed cultural event. Copyrights are expiring after 95 years, which means works that were published back in 1930 are becoming rights-free.
So they're available for free reproduction, adaptation, distribution.
Without seeking permission or paying any fees.
And we're not talking about obscure works here. We're talking about absolute pillars of 20th century literature.
Literary giants. You've got William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, Dashiell Hammett's hard-boiled classic The Maltese Falcon.
The book that basically invented a genre.
Right, and the novel that introduced Agatha Christie's Miss Marple.
Yeah.
Murder at the Vicarage. These are foundational texts, and they're about to be open for all kinds of new interpretations.
And the same is true for cinema.
Absolutely. Classic films entering the public domain include the Oscar-winning anti-war epic All Quiet on the Western Front.
An amazing film.
Marlene Dietrich's breakout German film The Blue Angel, and the seminal Marx Brothers comedy Animal Crackers.
Even music.
Yeah, musical standards like George Gershwin's I Got Rhythm and Hoagy Carmichael's Georgia on My Mind become free to use. And maybe most exciting for modern artists, some really iconic characters are scheduled to enter the public domain.
Like who?
Betty Boop and Pluto the dog.
Pluto, wow. So how does this floodgate really impact the audience, you, professionally?
It just fuels adaptation. It means a small film studio or an independent video game developer can now utilize and reimagine these classic characters and narratives without having to pay millions in licensing fees.
So it lowers the barrier to entry for creativity.
Massively. This huge injection of free, established intellectual property will undoubtedly drive new creative industries and IP adaptation throughout 2026 and for years after.
Okay, finally in this section, we have two profound generation-spanning anniversaries. Let's start with architecture. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona.
A historic milestone is planned for 2026. It's the completion of the Tower of Jesus Christ. At 172 meters, This will officially make the Sagrada Familia the world's tallest church.
And this completes the main structure.
It completes the 6 central towers, and it coincides exactly with the centennial of the death of the original architect Antoni Gaudí back in 1926. It's the culmination of over a century of incredible commitment.
An amazing story. And then here in North America, we have the America 250 commemoration.
Right, the U.S. 250th anniversary of independence. And this huge national anniversary coincides with 2 other things.
The centennial of Route 66.
And, of course, the World Cup invasion. It's a crowded year. The sources note there will be cultural events, major museum openings, new parks, with the big strategic focus on Washington, D.C. as the symbolic heart of the celebration. It's an attempt to capture a sense of unity amidst, well, profound national change.
So that's the fixed calendar. Unprecedented scale in sports, a return to deep space, scientific breakthroughs, a massive cultural injection. It is, by all accounts, a year of scheduled transformation and, a lot of optimism.
It is.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, these massive scheduled events, the World Cup, Artemis, America 250, they often serve as a kind of massive distraction.
A cultural anesthetic.
A cultural anesthetic, that's a good way to put it. It can mask the deeper, darker forces at play, because the other part of the sources we reviewed warns us that while the calendars are fixed, the geopolitical landscape is anything but.
And that stark contrast is the perfect bridge into our second and much more volatile section.
Right.
So in this section, we need to address the sources that detail potential conflicts, the breakdown of critical international agreements, and this worrying rise in domestic tension. And I just want to state up front, our duty here is to report impartially on the claims and narratives within the source material, ensuring you understand the arguments being made without us endorsing them.
That's essential. And we have to begin with the hard, undeniable deadline of nuclear arms control. In February 2026, the New START treaty is scheduled to expire. This is an event with, and this is not an exaggeration, existential implications.
What is the true significance of the end of New START? It's been in the news, but what does it really mean?
It signifies the definitive end of the last bilateral treaty framework, the last one. It limits the deployed nuclear arsenals of the 2 largest nuclear powers, the U.S. and Russia. Its expiration closes this strategic cycle of institutional restraint that began in the most terrifying days of the Cold War.
And the sources remind us just how effective those agreements were. They list SALT, the ABM Treaty, INF. These were historical mechanisms that actually worked for de-escalation.
Yeah, the historical context here is crucial for understanding the danger we're in now. The sources detail that the Soviet Union once had something like 40,000 warheads.
40?
And the U.S. had over 20,000. Through these pacts, those arsenals were reduced dramatically. They still represent 87% of the global total, but the reduction was massive. These treaties successfully managed that existential risk by providing verifiable rules and, importantly, inspections.
And yet here we are. What combination of events led to the expiration of New START without a successor in place?
The sources detail a kind of gradual hollowing out of the system. It arguably started with the U.S. withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF, treaty back in 2019.
Okay.
This was followed by Russia suspending its commitments under New START, and then the final nail in the coffin was the complete paralysis of verification inspections following the war in Ukraine.
So the trust just evaporated.
It completely evaporated. The trust required to maintain an agreement like this is gone.
So what's the implication? What does it mean to enter a world where nuclear deterrence prevails, but without these clear bilateral rules of the road?
What's fascinating and deeply concerning here is the psychological shift. Both nations still adhere to broader multilateral non-proliferation treaties, that's true, but the disappearance of the key bilateral mechanism means a return to an era of unconstrained competition in strategic weapons.
Like the Cold War.
Exactly. Experts warn this revives fears that many of us believe were confined to the 1980s. It removes that critical layer of institutionalized risk management, forcing policymakers and military leaders to operate based on estimates and assumptions, not verified data. It's a much more dangerous world.
Okay, if we pull the camera back from that U.S.-Russia dynamic, the sources paint a very detailed picture of highly regionalized, active conflict zones where tensions are escalating rapidly. Let's look first at the highly charged claims surrounding the Venezuela situation, which is described as a maximum pressure campaign.
The source material on this focuses intensely on the increased U.S. military footprint in the region. It details the largest U.S. military presence in the Caribbean since the Cold War. We're talking deployed aircraft carriers, stealth bombers.
And the official justification for this buildup?
The official line remains focused on counter-narcotics operations, but the source challenges this narrative directly and aggressively.
The narrative presented in these sources asserts a very clear, explicit economic motive behind the military buildup and the escalating pressure, like the blockade of illicit oil cargoes.
That's right. The sources are extremely specific on this point. They argue the primary objective is explicitly about accessing Venezuela's vast, proven oil and mineral reserves.
So the argument is that the Venezuelan government, because of its nationalized industry, either can't efficiently extract these resources or refuses to sell them to American interests on favorable terms.
Yes, the source uses very strong language here, claiming the goal is to essentially steal that oil, overthrow the current government, and install a puppet dictatorship that would be amenable to U.S. corporate interests.
Now, that is an incredibly strong, politically charged claim from the source material. I have to ask, to what extent do other geopolitical analysts view this buildup through a security lens? You know, maybe concerns about Russian or Iranian influence in the region rather than a purely economic one?
The source narrative we're analyzing dismisses those alternative security lenses entirely. It views them as a pretext.
So it's an excuse.
Just an excuse. It describes the strategy being used as a highly calculated maximum pressure campaign. And this campaign involves continuous economic crippling through sanctions, seizing oil tankers, circling fighter jets, all designed to push Venezuela to a breaking point.
And what's the goal of that breaking point?
The strategy, according to the source, hinges on forcing a response from Venezuela, any kind of military response that would provide the necessary and, quote, moral pretext for a full-scale direct military intervention, for a war.
And the sources don't hesitate to detail the alleged negative consequences this war would have back home for the average American citizen.
No, the economic claims are very precise. The source asserts that the conflict would be funded in two damaging ways. First, using existing tax dollars, and second, by the government engaging in massive money printing, which directly fuels domestic inflation.
And the wealth from the oil, if it were secured.
Furthermore, the claim is that any resulting wealth, the oil and mineral reserves, would not benefit the taxpayer at all. It would be immediately funneled to the large multinational corporations and banking institutions that allegedly finance and influence the U.S. government.
This raises a really important second-order consequence that the source connects military action to a domestic crisis, mass migration.
Yes, the source argues that this kind of imperialist foreign policy directly contributes to the mass migration crises we see at the U.S. borders. The logic is, if the U.S. destabilizes Venezuela's government, destroys its economy and infrastructure through sanctions and conflict, millions of people will inevitably be displaced.
And those displaced people have to go somewhere.
The natural response for those people is to flee the war-torn country and head north toward the U.S. border, which worsens the very crisis that certain political groups simultaneously oppose. The source explicitly calls the simultaneous support for interventionist war and the opposition to migration a core political contradiction.
Okay, moving to another critical flashpoint. The sources detail the Israel-Iran scenario, describing a high likelihood of a Part 2 conflict.
The analysis we received frames the short 12-day war in 2025 as merely Phase 1 in a grand strategic chess game.
Just the opening move.
Just the opening move. The core theory is that Israel's ultimate objective is establishing regional hegemony. And to do that, it requires eliminating Iran, which is described as the only significant non-aligned power in the region, and one that is reasonably close to developing a nuclear deterrent.
The core argument here revolves around a kind of strategic checkmate. The idea is that the initial attack wasn't meant to destroy Iran immediately, but to force its hand.
Precisely. The source argues that the initial 2025 attack compels Iran to accelerate its pursuit of a nuclear deterrent. They'll see it as essential for national self-defense.
Which in turn,
provides Israel with the necessary, internationally acceptable pretext for a decisive Phase 2 attack in 2026. This scenario, according to the source, would inevitably force the U.S. into direct military involvement, given the stated U.S. policy against a nuclear Iran.
What evidence does the source actually cite to suggest a Phase 2 is actively being prepared for in 2026?
The source points to several internal indicators. First, the ceasefire deal in Gaza. It's interpreted not as a step toward peace, but as a strategic pause.
A way to regroup.
A move to regroup forces and resources to focus entirely on the bigger fish, Iran. Second, the source observes a massive, coordinated pro-Israel social media campaign designed to preemptively shape global public opinion in favor of this upcoming decisive action.
And third,
And third, the source lushened political maneuvering, specifically outreach to powerful political figures in the U.S. to secure American intervention, even if the sitting president were initially reluctant to get involved.
so that narrative concludes with a pretty high degree of certainty that an Israel-Iran Phase 2 conflict is highly likely in 2026, pulling the U.S. into it in some capacity.
Yes. Now, shifting from international conflict to the domestic sphere, the source observes that political volatility and violence are rapidly escalating. It posits that instability is likely to be the rule, not the exception, in 2026.
The source focuses on the rising rhetoric and the direction of the observed violence. What's the central argument it makes regarding political polarization?
The analysis acknowledges that extremism exists across the spectrum, but it observes that the majority of organized calls for what it calls political vigilantism, cited in the sources, are primarily targeted against conservatives.
It mentions some specific incidents.
Yes, it mentions prominent incidents, like threats against specific media figures in 2025, and notes the perceived reactions from some on the cultural left that seem to, encourage or normalize that kind of aggression.
The source uses a very technical, critical term to describe the rhetoric used to incite this violence: stochastic terrorism. We need to make sure we understand this core concept clearly.
Right. The source defines stochastic terrorism as the calculated use of dehumanizing hyperinflated rhetoric. Things like repeatedly and falsely labeling political opponents Nazis or fascists, or mischaracterizing their beliefs in the most extreme, uncharitable way possible.
And the purpose is not an explicit call to violence.
No, that's the key. The purpose is to incite aggression among a large, unstable population without the instigator taking direct responsibility.
So the goal is to create a moral and psychological justification for future violence by first dehumanizing the target, making them seem worthy of attack.
That is precisely the central thesis the source presents. It's encapsulated by the claim: they don't attack you because you're a Nazi. They call you a Nazi so that they can attack you. The hyper-exaggerated accusation justifies violence against the average person who may simply hold different or conservative political or cultural beliefs.
Given this overwhelming scope of chaos-expiring nuclear treaties, potential wars, domestic instability, the source provides a crucial silver lining. It offers advice focused entirely on agency.
Yes, and the message is powerful. Since so much of the external world is outside of your personal control, the individual must focus intensely on what they can control.
And the suggested actions are practical.
Very specific. Gaining mastery of knowledge, especially history and human psychology. Becoming physically strong and healthy, building a strong, reliable social circle, and cultivating mental power and stoicism. The ultimate instruction is to hold the line internally, regardless of how intense the external storm becomes.
And that imperative to focus on internal systems for mastery is the perfect segue. The external world is defined by this chaos and acceleration, but our source material offers not one, but two robust, essential frameworks for controlling that internal environment and ensuring personal agency and success.
The volatility we've just discussed makes these internal systems not just helpful, but absolutely critical for ensuring clarity, consistency, and sustained progress in 2026.
So the first framework tackles the root cause of failed change. It's the identity shift, or as the source calls it, the three-stage metamorphosis. Before we break down the stages, what's the core principle that makes this shift more effective than, say, traditional goal setting?
The core principle is that identity shift operates upstream of behavior. Traditional self-help focuses on forcing new actions, using willpower to quit a habit or start exercising.
Which requires a ton of energy and is highly fragile.
Exactly. Identity shift, however, asks you to change who you believe you are. When you shift that core belief, the actions required to reinforce that new self-image become natural and, well, effortless.
It's the classic, powerful example of the difference between saying, I'm trying to be healthier, versus the much more definitive statement, I am an athlete, or I don't consume sugar.
Yes. The most powerful psychological force in the human personality is the desire to stay consistent with your self-image. If you identify as someone who doesn't consume sugar, rejecting a piece of cake is an affirmation of your identity, not some painful act of willpower.
And the framework, it roots itself deeply in anthropology, referencing Arnold van Gennep's 1909 foundational work, Rites of Passage. Why is that relevant here?
Van Gennep studied universal human rituals for transformation. from naming ceremonies to marriage rites, and he found they all follow the exact same three-part structure. Transformation can't happen linearly. It requires a symbolic death and rebirth.
It parallels the caterpillar's metamorphosis.
It does,
Yeah.
and the sources are emphatic on this point. There can be no rebirth without first letting the old self die.
Okay, let's break down the first required phase. Stage 1, separation, the cocoon. What is the necessary action here?
This is the symbolic death of the old identity. It requires consciously acknowledging and releasing the limiting beliefs, the roles, the narratives that no longer serve the future you.
So it's about letting go.
It is. And for many people, this involves acknowledging the good intentions of the past self, the one who protected you from risk or judgment, but formally thanking it and letting it go.
So what are the actionable steps for the listener to actually initiate this separation?
Okay, first, a deep analysis of the old identity. You have to identify the beliefs that are holding you back. Are you a minimizer? Do you have a deep fear of failure or judgment? The source provides the example of someone failing to launch a creative endeavor because they refused to fully own the identity of creator or YouTuber out of a fear of public failure.
You have to name it to tame it.
Exactly. Second, you perform a ritual. This isn't mystical, it's psychological. Write out the beliefs and narratives you want to release. Light a candle, burn the paper, or maybe write a long final letter to your old self, formally saying goodbye. This acts as a clear psychological demarcation point.
And the final step in separation is defining the target. And the sources say we need to avoid playing small here.
Yes. Define the future self with radical clarity and ambition. You have to drop the self-judgment about whether you deserve or can achieve that identity. Clearly picture the new you, the business owner, the person who runs marathons, the confident leader.
And there's a specific exercise for this.
The tactical advice is to write a detailed letter from that future self, dated 1 year from now. And in it, you detail the new beliefs, the massive achievements, and specifically how that future person allocates their time and their energy.
Okay, so once the old self has symbolically died, we enter the most critical and, frankly, uncomfortable phase. Stage 2, liminality, the chrysalis. This is the stage of dissolution, the messy, magical in-between. Why is this stage so painful?
Because the external world is wired to maintain the old you. The old identity has dissolved into what the source calls sludge, and the new one hasn't solidified yet. This generates massive inertia from your environment and especially your relationships.
The sources frame this using social identity theory.
That's right. We define ourselves through our tribes, and our friends and family are psychologically wired to maintain the group status quo.
It's that phenomenon where old friends subconsciously try to pull you back to your old default because your change threatens their comfort and therefore their own identity.
Exactly right. When you change, your brain interprets the loneliness and the social friction as a potential threat to your survival, to your tribe membership. This is why so many people abandon change right here in this phase. They can't handle the discomfort of being between tribes.
So we need specific, powerful tools for navigating this phase.
We do.
Give us the first key tool for navigating the chrysalis.
Environmental change. If you are changing your identity, your environment absolutely must change to match the future self. This means aligning your physical surroundings.
Like what?
Clearing clutter, redesigning your home office, investing in a new wardrobe that embodies the energy of the person you are becoming. The logic is simple. If your environment looks and feels like the old self, you will naturally revert to the old self.
The second tool addresses embodiment channeling the future self's energy.
This is a crucial distinction. You are not faking it till you make it. You are channeling the energy. The source provides the famous example of Beyoncé creating her alter ego, Sasha Fierce.
Right.
Beyoncé was, by her own admission, a naturally shy person. She created Sasha Fierce as a mechanism to practice supreme stage presence and confidence in her performances. She used that alter ego as a temporary vehicle in her liminal phase, repeatedly channeling that powerful energy until the new state of being became automatic for her.
The framework also suggests the tactical difference between simple affirmations and powerful incantations.
Yes, affirmations, just saying, I am confident 10 times, they often fail because they are just words that your subconscious rejects. Incantations transform this by backing the words with profound emotional conviction and physical energy.
So how do you do that?
The technique involves taking a deep, diaphragmatic breath, grounding yourself physically, and then declaring, I am confident, with power, with conviction. It aligns your head, the belief, your heart, the emotion, and your gut, your conviction. This alignment forces the new identity into your entire nervous system.
And finally, the concept of developing a circle of mentors.
In that liminal space, you often won't know how the new version of you should respond to a challenge. The solution is to develop a virtual circle of mentors, people you admire, living or dead. When you're confronted with a new situation, you pause and you channel their energy.
You ask yourself, what would they do?
Exactly. How would mentor X handle this difficult conversation? Or what would mentor Y's behavioral response be to this opportunity? This provides temporary, powerful guidance until your own new identity fully integrates that wisdom.
Which brings us to the payoff. Stage 3, reintegration, the butterfly.
This is the new normal. The new identity is integrated. It operates effortlessly. You no longer need the conscious mechanism of the alter ego or the incantations because the new way of being has become your default state. This is where the effort dramatically reduces.
And what if the required change, the gap between the old you and the future you, feels too daunting, too big of a leap?
Then you use stepping stones. If the leap across the identity puddle is too massive, you risk failure and reversion. So instead, you create intermediate identity goals.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If your ultimate goal is, I am a high-performing CEO, but you're currently, I am a procrastinating middle manager, that's a huge jump. So you start smaller. Your first stepping stone might be, I am a highly organized and reliable team leader. You use the three-step process to achieve that first smaller identity, then you use that confidence and structure to launch to the next one. It makes radical transformation manageable.
That is an incredibly thorough structure for internal psychological change. But, profound change is meaningless without execution, which brings us to the second system for mastery, the CEO method.
This system is designed specifically to solve the execution problem. It's to ensure that the identity shifts you make are consistently reinforced by daily action. But the foundational element, before you even look at the acronym, is alignment.
You must start with your why.
Your why is your non-negotiable North Star. It's your higher purpose. If you don't know why you are executing, the first moment of resistance will stop you cold. The system is based on a yin-yang principle. Your mindset, the why, has to align with your action, the how.
And when they're aligned.
You create a positive spiral. The baseline belief that your work will succeed feeds the action, and the action constantly reinforces the belief. It's a powerful loop.
Okay, let's break down the CEO acronym, starting with C-cut, critical.
Most people fail because they think they aren't doing enough. They keep adding activities, goals, projects. The CEO method is radically focused on the opposite. You're not doing little enough. Focus is achieved not by doing more, but by radical cutting.
This means ruthlessly cutting what doesn't serve you in time, in energy, in money, and reallocating those resources to only the 2 or 3 critical goals that feed your North Star. Can you give us an expanded example of the level of cutting that's required here?
It requires extreme clarity and sometimes painful choices. The source provides a fantastic anecdote. The founder was rejected from an MBA program they had spent immense energy applying for. The emotional blow was severe.
I can imagine.
But the eventual clarity was powerful. The core why was making a positive impact through creativity. A full-time MBA would have been a 5-year distraction from that core purpose. Cutting the MBA or cutting secondary social media platforms wasn't a loss. It was a total reallocation of focus to the one path. In that case, building a YouTube channel until it succeeded.
So the rule is, if it doesn't feed your North Star, it must be cut, regardless of how good it looks on paper.
That's the rule.
Next is E, execute. This is the phase that guarantees success through consistency.
Execution is the guarantee, because success is, at its core, mathematically determined by tiny efforts compounded over time. People procrastinate because they see the goal, say, writing a book or launching a major business, as one overwhelming endeavor.
So you break it down.
You break that daunting goal down into incredibly small, manageable, daily tasks. Researching for 30 minutes, writing 1 script page, making 3 sales calls, whatever it is.
And consistency, which is the key to compounding, is built through habits. But the system emphasizes starting small to avoid burnout.
Absolutely. The system mandates starting with only a few keystone habits. These are actions that, when you implement them, cascade positive effects into every other area of your life.
And there's a structure to this.
A very clear structure. 1 keystone habit in each of the 4 life domains. Wealth, like 30 minutes of deep work focused on revenue generation. Health, 20 minutes of morning movement. Relationships, calling one family member or close friend weekly. And personal fulfillment, 15 minutes of reading or skill acquisition. This balanced approach ensures consistency without sacrificing one area of your life for success in another.
Finally, we have O, optimize. This is where we break what Albert Einstein called the definition of insanity.
Right, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Optimization means you must reflect, measure, and iterate to learn faster. It involves setting aside time every week to review the data, what worked, what failed, where did my time really go, and then adjusting the plan for the next week.
And the result of this compounding optimization.
It creates the snowball effect. A consistent 1% daily improvement, compounded over 365 days, results in you being 37 times better than where you started. The founder's success with this method is in balancing running a large business, managing a healthy social life, maintaining peak fitness, and still averaging 8 hours of sleep because the entire system is designed for efficiency and iteration.
The sources mention that the CEO system forms the strategic foundation for a new app, the Exec app. How does the system translate into that technology?
The app is designed to be the integration tool that automates the structure. It combines the mindset frameworks with personalized strategy and daily coaching. It acts as a kind of AI coach.
So it guides you through the process.
It guides you through mapping out your North Star, setting measurable keystone habits across those 4 life domains, and prompting guided reflections for optimization. It's all about solving the problem of guaranteed follow-through. It moves you from conceptual knowledge to tangible progress by making the system automatic.
It sounds like the ultimate tool for achieving structure and accountability when the external world is pure chaos.
That's precisely its purpose. In a world of volatility, personalized, consistent structure is the ultimate competitive advantage. It allows you to move from feeling stuck and overwhelmed by information to making rapid, tangible progress.
So we've covered the 2 defining realities of 26. On the one hand, a fixed calendar filled with staggering transformation. The Continental World Cup, the Artemis return, to deep space, transformative cancer diagnostics.
And on the other hand, an economic and geopolitical landscape that is defined by instability, the end of nuclear arms control, and the brink of multiple potential conflicts as reported in our source material.
And we've provided you with 2 complete internal systems for mastery. The 3-stage metamorphosis for fundamental identity change, which addresses the root of failed habits.
And the CEO method for consistent, aligned execution, which ensures accountability. These structures are really the essential tools for retaining agency in a year where instability is officially the rule.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the provocative thought we want to leave you with tonight. We know from our sources that agentic AI is rapidly integrating into business. It's capable of automating complex processes, personalized concierge services, running strategic data analysis.
And we also know that systems like the Exec app can now automate strategy, planning, and accountability with an AI coach.
So if AI can increasingly automate execution, planning, and even strategic reflection, all the doing.
The one remaining domain that AI cannot yet solve for us is the emotional and psychological difficulty of liminality, that chrysalis stage. The moment where we choose to let the old self die and endure the discomfort, the friction, and the profound loneliness of being between identities.
The ultimate competitive advantage in 2026 may not be who has the best automated tool for execution, but who possesses the resilience and the psychological grit to master the discomfort of that transition. The human ability to choose radical transformation and bear the internal cost of change, that remains the final unsolved frontier of self-mastery.
So take the information we've synthesized today and choose one framework. Define your future self, or decide which non-critical activity you need to cut today. That is where your personal power resides in navigating 2026.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.